This is Plant-Based Briefing, Thoughts on Lab-Grown Meat by Sailesh Rao at climatehealers.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson, and Plant-Based Briefing is the curated content plant-based podcast where I narrate a variety of articles from experts, with their permission, on topics related to healthy, compassionate, and sustainable living in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. Today's post is from Dr. Sailesh Rao. He's the founder and executive director of Climate Healers, a nonprofit dedicated towards healing the Earth's climate. Dr. Rao is also an author and executive producer of at least 4 current documentaries and more that are coming out, including The Human Experiment, Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret, What the Health, and A Prayer for Compassion. He's a human, earth, and animal liberation activist, a husband, dad, and since 2010, a starstruck grandfather. He's promised his granddaughter, Kimaya, that the world will be largely vegan before she turns 16 in 2026, so that people will stop eating her relatives, the animals. He has faith that humanity will transform to keep his pinky promise to Kimaya, not just for ethical reasons, but also out of sheer ecological necessity. I recently had the pleasure and the honor of being interviewed by Sailesh on his Vegan World 2026 Moonshot podcast that's live streamed on Jane Unchained News. What an intelligent, generous, and compassionate man he is. During one part of our conversation, I was expressing my excitement over lab-grown meat and the potential benefits for the animals and the environment. He mentioned that the jury was out as far as the environmental benefits of lab-grown meat, particularly the high level of energy required to produce it, and the reliance on fossil fuels, at least currently. He also mentioned he kind of looks at it as a transition food for people who aren't yet ready to give up animal flesh. And so this post that I'm reading today that he's written is an interesting and different perspective on lab-grown and cultured meat, compared to some earlier episodes that I'll link in the show notes. So I'm happy to share it with you, and now let's get to today's plant-based briefing. Thoughts on Lab-Grown Meat by Sailesh Rao at climatehealers.org. The article begins with a quote. "If you are not at the table as an equal, you are on the menu." Tony Gonzalez, American Indian Movement. Vegans are a diverse bunch. Some vegans are enthusiastic about lab-grown meat, and some not so much. From an ethical perspective, veganism is about abolishing animal slavery and objectification and respecting all life. To understand the situation of lab-grown meat from the standpoint of ethical veganism, I like to put myself in the shoes of the victim and see how that feels. I imagine that a group of aliens have taken over the earth and like to eat humans for food. I finally managed to persuade the most progressive among the aliens to stop enslaving, objectifying, and eating humankind. However, some among the aliens ask if they could take a few cells from my body instead and use that to grow my meat in the lab, because they really, really like to eat the meat of human beings for food. It's a matter of taste, tradition, and fond memories of their childhood days for them. How would I feel about this? Personally, I don't think I would be too happy about this. From a practical standpoint, I would be concerned that if they had a power outage in their industrial facilities for making lab-grown meat, they would revert back to eating me and my friends again, even if the lab-grown meat movement is wildly successful. I would be concerned that as long as my body is falsely considered as essential food by the aliens, a subset of them would find it cheaper to grow me and my friends directly instead of growing my meat in the lab. I would be concerned that many of the aliens would see me as the real meat and consider the lab-grown stuff as fake meat. Therefore, the lab-grown meat might be used as a means to perpetuate the continued enslavement and oppression of human beings for food by the alien meat industry. Finally, I would be concerned that lab-grown meat wouldn't address the fundamental root cause of the factory farming and oppression of humans by the aliens, the systemic promotion of greed, animal foods, and selfishness among the aliens, which is also causing tremendous inequity, injustice, and ill health among the aliens themselves. Therefore, I would urge the aliens to abandon the idea of lab-grown human meat and develop all the necessary infrastructure for a non-violent, plant-based vegan world instead. What do you think? You just listened to Thoughts on Lab-Grown Meat by Dr. Sailesh Rao at climatehealers.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. I appreciate you listening to Plant-Based Briefing. Please share this podcast with others who might be interested in plant-based and vegan topics related to healthy, compassionate, and sustainable living. And if you don't mind, please take a moment to write a quick review or give the podcast a rating. That really helps others find it easier. Thanks for listening.